Good evening and welcome to round 8 here for the Nations Cup at La Plata in Argentina. I am Chris Kavanagh, your host for this series, and we are set for some fast and chaotic racing ahead of us. We have been at this racetrack before in the Retro Racing Managers League and it was proven to be quite a chaotic affair, so this might be just the same, but we will wait and see for that, shall we? Whilst we introduce you the standings for the leagues going ahead, and we'll start with Division 2. And Raffaele Marcello leads the way just by only 1 point to Felix Rosenquist, who was the champion last season. And Felipe Nasser only 4 behind in third. Jose Maria Lopez, who's going to want to make a name for himself on home soil here on 4th place. Only 9 back is a really close affair all the way down the order. Very, very close. All the way down to 7th and Pato Award, who will want to get as close as he can to Felix Rosenquist and then hopefully leapfrog him. And there are some teams that have been creeping up. Team Wales have been getting some impressive results. Ella Lloyd, for example, P16 on 47 points with a great victory out of Mexico City. And there'll be some teams that will really want to make an effort, like the Arlen Cars and Marcus Ericsson, to see what he can do today for Sweden. But we can see what the nation's standings looks like for the Division 2. Italy are in front, gapping a little bit by 25 points to Argentina themselves, and then Sweden in third with 26. It's so close down the order from there, though, all the way to Mexico in P7, and then Wales, with their great efforts last time out, now up in 8th with 109 points. 45 back from Italy, so it's quite a lot to go, but let's see what they can do from there. And now we can see the grid for the first race of the day, Division 2 Sprint. Jose Maria Lopez leads the charge with the 2 Scottish guards, Sandy Mitchell and Paul Aresta in 3rd place. And then we have Pato Award in 4th, Owen De Angelis in 5th, Jakub Spokowski for Poland in 6th, Pietro Fittipaldi in 7th, Antonio Fias Acosta in 8th with Alfred Evans for Wales in 9th, Sheldon van der Linde in 10th, Felipe Albuquerque in 11th, Ella Lloyd in 12th, Kelvin van der Linde in 13th with Roman Belinsky in 14th, Raffaele Marcello in 15th with Rafael Belegomez in 16th, Max Hart 17th with Nico Barone in 18th, and then we've got Felix Rosenquist in 19th, Arthur Leclerc 20th, Nicholas Latifi in 21st, Antonio Giovinazzi 22nd. Felipe Nasser to serve a penalty from this last race out in Mexico City is down in 23rd, Stefan Riquelme in 24th, Alex Dunn 25th, and Marcus Ericsson rounds out the grid in 26th. And for the first race of the day, over to Ryan Ferris.
It's time for the first race of the evening, Division 2 here, and it is hometown hero Lopez on pole here at La Plata, with Sandy Mitchell starting in 2nd. And as the lights go out, we're away here. And it's a good getaway there from Lopez, but Mitchell's coming back at him. Down also coming along here is Smirkowski, who's under pressure and being passed into turn round. Up into 3rd goes Da Costa. And who's that? That's Fittipaldi out. Pietro Fittipaldi already out at the first corner, and it looks as though he's probably been helped there. So that's Evans. And that's Lloyd, who's just gone into the back of him. So Lloyd, our race winner last time out, already in a bit of trouble, having taken out Pietro Fittipaldi at the start of this race. Meanwhile, back at the front, it is Jose Maria Lopez who leads here, ahead of Sandy Mitchell, but Mitchell under pressure from Da Costa. We come through very, very fast corners here in La Plata, very flowing as well. And it looks as though Da Costa is going to be making a move at some point on Mitchell. They're still trying to move the car away. Ella Lloyd there with a 30-second time penalty and a 10-place grid penalty for the feature race. So as we come round the final corner to complete the first lap, and already in the background, as I could say, Da Costa pulling along the side Sandy Mitchell for position, and he's going to have the inside going into turn 1 here. Further on back, here is Paul Aresta being passed now by Pato Award. He's got De Angelis just behind him in 8th. As they come down to this very, very fast turn 4. As we come to the exit, there's De Angelis and he's gone off. Off goes De Angelis, he's lost the rear wing as you can see. And does he collect any? Yes, he does. And it looks as though that's one of the South African cars there going off. So, well, Sheldon van der Linde's there in 5th, so it's going to be Calvin van der Linde. And I can see one of the Team Italy cars going off as well. I think that's Raffaele Marcello. So you see on board there, already in the distance, you can see the car pirouetting and not really much Calvin could do to try and avoid him. But a slight mistake there, going slightly wide for De Angelis, and it's taken all 3 of them out. So confirmation there of those who have retired, and indeed it was Raffaele Marcello for Team Italy who also retired there of the 3. So De Angelis receiving some penalty points there, but nothing too major, just a bit of a slap on the wrist. Now, here you can see Mitchell having another go at Da Costa there for P2, I believe. Smiakowski taking a watching brief, and down the inside goes Mitchell once again. This is allowing Lopez a bit of breathing space. He's probably got roughly around a second now as a result of Mitchell passing Da Costa, but we'll see once we go through the next timing beam. Here's Ella Lloyd, who currently runs in 10th at the moment, but obviously has that 30-second penalty hanging over her. Throw one back. Here's Felipe Nasser, and he's gone wide as well. Done exactly the same thing as De Angelis, but luckily doesn't manage to pirouette across the circuit. But now, with no front or rear wing, he's going to have to go back to pit lane for repairs. So that's pretty much the day over there, or at least the sprint race over for Felipe Nasser. Meanwhile, back at the front, and Lopez building that advantage. Nearly a second it is. I said it was almost about a second. But now, Da Costa once again repays the favour on Mitchell, takes the inside, and second position away from the Scottish driver, which, well, this is costing them time to Lopez, and this is causing a bit of a train behind, because now you have Smiakowski and Sheldon van der Linde, and you could also just about see O'Ward joining onto the back of this battle for second. Felipe Nasser indeed makes it back to pit lane fine. You see Sheldon van der Linde all over the back of Smiakowski, trying to find a way through to take that P4, but whilst all that's going on, Smiakowski is trying to find a way through on Mitchell. So it's around turn 10, and it looks as though Da Costa's managed to take a couple of car lengths out of Mitchell, so he's got a bit of breathing space as he come on to the start-finish straight, but someone who doesn't have any is Mitchell, who's got Smiakowski all over the back of him, but Sheldon van der Linde also not too far away as well, so van der Linde almost, if this was NASCAR, there'd be a bit of bump drafting going on there, but Mitchell demoted to 4th, Smiakowski into 3rd, and van der Linde has to go back to the drawing board. Paul di Resta finds himself back up into P10. Lopez in the lead, but that lead starting to come down a little bit there, with Da Costa closing the gap down to 8/10 it is now. Meanwhile, more squabbling going on for the final places in the top 5. Whilst all that's going on, Marcus Ericsson with a major lock up there, down in 21st, so he's 32 seconds off the lead, so something suggests to me he's also had an issue somewhere. And back at the front, and that lead is coming down massively. He's almost halved it in this lap alone. Here's Nicholas Latifi having a little bit of a look there on Villa Gomez for P12. I think this is going to be job done for the Canadian. And O'Ward's managed to go up into 5th, so he's gone in front of Albuquerque, or was nearly passed by Albuquerque, I think. and then has gone in front of Sheldon van der Linde for P5. Mitchell's hung on to P4 this time around, and the gap down to half a second between Lopez and Da Costa. But unfortunately, Sheldon van der Linde has had a gearbox failure. So van der Linde, in what has been such a promising start to the weekend, running inside the top 5, it's all come to a bit of an abrupt end at this moment in time, and has lost the gearbox. So positive going on into this feature race, but no points scored in the sprint at least. Back towards the front, and the gap is down once again. Lopez is now going to have to be defending quite a lot here against Da Costa, but Da Costa's got too much of a good run coming out to the final corner, and he's going to have the inside going into turn 1, and that is the lead for the Portuguese driver. Now the home crowd probably won't be happy about that, but Lopez still with a decent pace here. If he can stay within the slipstream with Da Costa and stay close enough, he's got an opportunity to have another go back again. O'Ward has moved up into 4th ahead of Mitchell, with Smiakowski still in 3rd. But Da Costa's gone. I think there was almost a brief change there. But unless there was just a little bit of a blip on the timing tower, because there's half a second now between Da Costa and Lopez, and already Lopez isn't thinking about in front, he's thinking of behind, and Smiakowski is closing on the Argentine driver. But safe enough at this moment in time. But someone who isn't safe at the moment is Felipe Albuquerque, who's got Elvin Evans coming down the inside of him. But not enough straight line speed, it seems, for Team Wales. Coming out of the final corner, it looked as if it was going to be a done deal, but just ran out of top end speed compared to the Team Portugal car. So the gap gradually building at the front for Da Costa. Lopez unable to hang on at the moment, with Smiakowski gradually closing in. You've got O'Ward there in 4th, but it's a bit of a distant force in comparison. You can see in the background there, Evans still all over the back of Albuquerque there for P6. Already you can see as they fire out the final corner, Smiakowski's all over the back end of Lopez, and he's definitely got the pace on the exit. But it looks as though that Team Argentina car is very slippery in a straight line, but unable to hang on. Smiakowski had to go for a second dip there, and had to pull back in on the slipstream, but managed to get it done on the second time of asking. But someone who still hasn't managed to get through is Albuquerque on Evans, or vice versa. But Smiakowski in 2nd position. And Ella Lloyd goes off. And a 3rd driver goes off on the curbs of T4. Just about manages to get in front. Also held up. Oh! But this time is taken out. So not the safest of rejoins there, but I don't think has managed to take anyone out there. But I feel like there needs to be some investigation there into that turn 4. It seems fairly violent. If you're just a metre or so off of the line and missing the apex, it just seems to unload the car into a spin, and it's caused some pretty big incidents there. Anyway, back with the races, and Lopez demoted from the podium now as O'Ward goes up into 3rd. Evans finally goes through on Albuquerque for P6. And Latifi also goes through on Di Resta. So Latifi currently in the points. I remind you, as I usually do, top 10 score in the sprint. So Smiakowski trying to chase down Da Costa. 1.4 seconds is the gap. And that gap is coming down. It's 1.1. Across the line, I think that is. Now it's across the line, it's gone out to 1.2. So Da Costa definitely has a fast car in a straight line compared to Team Poland, but potentially Smiakowski might have a little bit more pace over the Portuguese driver, but there's almost 3 abreast here down the start-finish straight. That's Giovinazzi fighting with Villagomez and De Resta, and Giovinazzi takes that final point away from the Scottish driver. But nothing much to worry about at the moment for Team Scotland, as they still do have Sandy Mitchell there in 5th position, who is actually slowly closing on Lopez for that P4. Here's Arthur Leclerc battling away. This is the fight just outside the points now, with Giovinazzi scampering off up the road. This is 11th, 12th and 13th. So definitely something going to be lined up down the start-finish straight this time, but who's going to take who? Will we see Villagomez go through on De Resta, or will Leclerc find a way through on the pair of them? Looks as though it's the earlier one. Villagomez trying to find a way through on De Resta, very much a bit like Smiakowski earlier, has to duck back into the toe just to get a little bit more top speed into the corner. So another position there lost for De Resta. And it seems as though they are struggling. Side by side in the background there was Rosenqvist and Leclerc. So I wonder if Leclerc's going to find himself in any form of bother. I don't think he has. On board now with Stefan Rakoumi. He's down in 17th position. Not the best of weekends so far for the Monegasque driver. But he's closing up onto the rear end of Max Hart. So here is O'Ward, P3, closing in on Smiakowski. Da Costa's been responding to Smiakowski. He's opened the gap up. Side by side here is Mitchell and Albuquerque. So Evans has gone through on Mitchell at some point, and now 2 has Albuquerque. So gone from 5th to 7th in a matter of a lap. But O'Ward definitely feeling confident within the car in this second part of this sprint race. Not many laps to go. It's a very quick one for the sprint race here. 12 of the 17 already completed. Everyone goes streaming through. Da Costa with a comfortable lead there, but goes slightly wide there, gets it all locked up going through the final corner. And is that going to give Smiakowski a little bit of a sniff? He's obviously way too far away at the moment to think about a move, but he has closed in from 1.5 to 1.2 as a result of that slight lock-up there. Max Hart there with an issue, having to pit. And here is Elvin Evans, who's hunting down Lopez. The race started well for the Argentine driver. He led for a few laps, but reality has soon sunk in, potentially burning through his tyres a bit too soon, a little bit overexcited potentially in front of the home crowd. But it looks as though he's going to find his way, or find himself behind Evans at this moment, and Felipe Albuquerque isn't too far behind with a few laps remaining. So around the final corner we go. Is Evans going to have a good slingshot out of the corner? As we could see from earlier, the Team Wales car struggles a little bit for straight line speed. He's side by side, or trying to go side by side, but he's going to probably have to dip back in again, and goes down the inside and takes the position away from Lopez. So Evans up into 4th, Lopez demoted to 5th, but as you can see, Felipe Albuquerque all over the back of the Argentine driver, and it looks as though with a few laps remaining he could find himself outside the top 5. So it is O'Ward. He's still trying to close in on Smirkowski for that P2. Smirkowski still staying within 1.3 seconds of Da Costa, so Da Costa can't really afford to make many more mistakes with a few laps remaining. Smirkowski's keeping him honest for the time being. Here's Latifi struggling a little bit there through turn 10. He is in 9th position. A good result for the moment for Latifi. He's struggled a little bit for the start of the season. An electrical issue for Giovinazzi. So Giovinazzi is outside the top 10 at the moment. He's there in 11th. But luckily for him, he's close enough to pit lane. He can pit and can put some new tyres on, but I don't think there's enough laps left for him to really do anything. Here's Rosenqvist. And need I to remind you, he was the champion last season, but some of his performances have been a bit lacklustre this season. There's been a few flashes of brilliance, but not much of what we saw from last season. As Max Hart, predictably on some newer tyres, sets the fastest lap of the race. So here is Paul di Resta down in 13th position. He finds himself stuck behind, or not too far behind, Leclerc and Rosenqvist, with Verone just behind. But as we come on to the final lap, Smirkowski's closed once again on Da Costa, but he's not quite done enough, I don't think, unless Da Costa makes a howler of a mistake on this final lap. And Giovinazzi, after having some electrical issues, comes straight out of pit lane and is going to have to go back in. With a lap remaining as well. That's going to add insult to injury. But for Da Costa, he's driven a measured race so far, with a few corners remaining. He comes down into turn 10. He's got one corner remaining after this one. Smirkowski still trying to close, but it's not going to be enough. And the checkered flag is being made ready for Da Costa as he comes out the final corner and comes down the start-finish straight to win here at La Plata. And that is Division 2 sprint victory, with Smirkowski second and O'Ward third. You see the rest of the field come streaming through. Latifi finishing inside the top 10. A great result there for the Canadian. And Villagomez sneaks in for the final point. Still, we wait for some of the drivers who got caught up in some incidents and issues across the race to come across the line. There's Max Hart coming across the line and Felipe Neza. And Giovinazzi indeed decides to do the final lap with only half front wing. But confirmation there that Antonio Felix da Costa wins here at La Plata ahead of Jakub Smiakowski and Pato O'Ward. Elwyn Evans came through to finish 4th ahead of Felipe Albuquerque, and Jose Maria Lopez finished 6th. Sandy Mitchell was 7th ahead of Roman Belinsky. Nicholas Latifi was 9th ahead of Raffaele Villagomez, taking the final point there. Felix Rosenquist was 11th ahead of Arthur Leclerc, and Paul di Resta was 13th. Moving further on down the order, Nico Varone was 14th ahead of Stefan Riquelme. Alex Dunn was 16th with Marcus Ericsson 17th. Max Hart coming through into 18th ahead of Felipe Neza, and Antonio Giovinazzi being the last one to finish. Moving on to the retirements now, it's Ella Lloyd ahead of Sharon van der Linde, Raffaele Marcello, Kelvin van der Linde, Roman De Angelis and Pietro Fittipaldi. Now, as I said, there was some issues that had been raised with the track, particularly with Turn 4, and I believe one of our Tilke people have gone out and fixed it for the next upcoming races, and I'll hand you back over to Chris, who will give you the lowdown going into Division 1.
That makes it 2 sprint wins in a row for Antonio Felix da Costa. Well done for them, and good efforts there from Portugal. Really making a charge now into this championship. And we've got another great win, podium, for Jakub Smiakowski, something that podium really been needing, and Pato O'Ward and Elfyn Evans for that matter. And whilst it is sad news to say that Ella Lloyd, now because of that particular punishment that she has got, she is going to be having to take a round ban at the next race, which, so she can still take part in the feature, but she will not be able to take part in round 9, which will be in Kyle Army. But anywho, we can press on now and we can look at Division 1 standings. Kevin Estre leads the way for France, only 2 ahead of Nick de Vries in the Netherlands, and then Carl Kirkwood with some impressive races of late and out in P3 with only 4 back. Philip Hansen with a great victory recent times in 4th. Alex Palou is been struggling a little bit, maybe because with the BOP heavy car, but he's still there in P5, only 12 back, along with Van Gisbergen and Verline. And then Sebastian Buemi in his first season after being promoted, and now P8. Let's see what he can do. And then some drivers certainly down in the order that want to try and garner some more points. Scott Dixon and René Rast are 2 in particular. Rast in P17, only 43 back, but it's a lot way to go for him. And Scott Dixon, he's just been getting a lot of retirement issues and could really hope to do something about that. But now we can see how the standings looks for each nation in Division 1 and Spain. Yeah, they are in front, but it is only 8 points separating the top 9. Germany, even though they're in 9th, they could easily, with some good results coming their way, be P1. It's a very close call in this championship indeed. Now the Div 1 sprint grid, and we have Stoffel Vandoorne on pole with Louis Delatraz for Switzerland in 2nd, with Yuki Tsunoda in 3rd, Kevin Magnussen in 4th, Pascal Wehrlein 5th, Shane Van Gisbergen for New Zealand in 6th, with Sebastian Buemi in 7th, Scott Dixon 8th. Then we've got 2 Australian drivers of Mostert and Power in P9 and P10. Kamuka Kobayashi in 11th with Nick de Vries in 12th, Alex Palou 13th, Robert France in 14th, Randy Raston 15th with Carl Kirkwood 16th, Philip Hansen in the 17th, Christian Lundgaard 18th, Kevin Estre and Sion Pagenaud in 19th and 20th, with Hugo Gachupu at 21st, Jake Dennis in 22nd, Charles Fitz 23rd, Stanis Jovic 24th, Daniel Yukadir 25th, and Enzo Tarnvelichkul in 26th. And for the second race of the day, it's back to Ryan Ferris.
We're back again for another race, Division 1 Sprint, and hopefully we'll see a little less drama through Turn 4, but we're getting away here. Vandoorne gets away well, Delatraz pulls alongside, but someone who's got a really good drive there is Yuki Tsunoda, who's coming round the outside, down the inside of the pair of them is Magnussen, who forces out Delatraz to the outside and gets collected, so Delatraz already out of the race. Delatraz got a good getaway there to take the lead. But then Magnussen decided to make it 3 abreast into turn 1, and 2 into 1 doesn't usually go, but 3 definitely doesn't. And Delatraz just found himself stuck on the apex. And Tsunoda, who also thought he was going to be taking the lead there, finds himself forced out. He goes to turn into the corner, finds Magnussen there, and then just loses the front end a little bit and bumps off into Delatraz. So Delatraz, our first retirement, which leaves Magnussen leading ahead of Van Dorn and Tsunoda. And the stewards believe that Tsunoda was at fault there, and has given him a 10-second penalty, grid drop, and some points to his licence. That incident has caused a bit of a gap as well, as you can see, between Tsunoda and Van Gisbergen. Van Gisbergen has his teammate Dixon for company. So as they come out the final corner, Dixon's got a run here, but also in the background is Buemi. And is he going to have a go? No, thinks better of it. The 2 New Zealand cars side by side into turn 1. And that was Will Power there, thinking he was going to have a move there on Buemi. So Dixon already away from Van Gisbergen and is chasing after Tsunoda. Remember, Tsunoda now has a 10-second penalty. Further on back, here's Pascal Wehrlein duelling away with De Vries over 9th position. Back towards the front, Van Dorn regrouping a little bit now, and looks to be trying to close in on Magnussen. He's brought it down to 0.6 of a second. Further back here is Enzo Tarn, and he's battling away with Daniel Juncker, who's for some reason towards the back of the field. Magnussen, knowing that Van Dorn is quick, the gap has come down. Even though Magnussen sets the fastest lap of the race, the gap is down to just shy of half a second. No real shuffling going on behind. Dixon still ahead of Van Gisbergen, but not quite close enough yet to be challenging Tsunoda for that place. Meanwhile, Robin Friends, who at one point was battling away, trying to find a way through on Wehrlein. Wehrlein's actually gone through on De Vries for 9th position. And Kobayashi is snuck on through into 11th. Van Dorn must have made a mistake this time around. The gap's almost out to a second between Magnussen and Van Dorn, but it looks as though it's coming back down again. Now, Van Gisbergen starting to come under pressure now from Sebastian Buemi. And Van Gisbergen starting to lose a bit of toe from teammate Dixon, but it's just about helping him enough to stay ahead of Buemi. But in the background, the two Australian cars dueling away, and Chaz Mostert goes from pretty much goes from 8th up into 6th. So a great move there from Mostert into turn 1. Lundgaard is out of the race, so he's had an engine failure. On board now with Magnussen, who is starting to pull away again from Van Dorn. Van Dorn brought the gap down, but it's now gone back out to 1.3. whether Van Doorn's made a mistake or Magnussen's just decided to turn the pace up a bit. From back, Kobayashi being harassed by Frines for that 11th position. To come down the start-finish straight. A few moves going on in the background there. There's Verline trying to find a way through on Will Power and goes through for the position. And De Vries there in 10th. Power struggling a bit there. It definitely seems to be a tricky situation there down the start-finish straight for this dueling group. Further back here is Simon Pagenaud. In 14th position at the moment, finds himself behind Carl Kirkwood. On board with, I think that's Bohemi one might be on board with at the moment, although I don't think that's Mostert up front, so it might be, it is Tsunoda actually, it's Yuki Tsunoda we're on board with in 3rd position. We got there eventually. He's being closed down by Dixon. Whilst all this is going on, Mostert is trying to find a way through on Van Gisbergen. Mostert still not able to find a way through. Will Power goes through on Verline. So Verline, after going through on Power, finds another way back through. Dixon being told of the threat from Team Australia from behind. As it stands for the moment with Tsunoda's 10-second penalty, Dixon actually finds himself in 3rd. Chaz Mostert still unable to find a way through on Van Gisbergen. Bohemi's managed to pull himself away from Power, so under no real threat from behind, but still trying to latch into this battle up ahead as Mostert again trying to find a way through on Van Gisbergen, but again, this time, I thought it was going to work this time, but it just seems as though Team Australia very good through the corners, but Team New Zealand just have that little bit extra in the straight line. Kirkwood has got an issue, he's going to have to pull out the race, but whilst all that's going on track position, Dixon goes up into 3rd. So Kirkwood out of the race there. Verline, after all that battling going on for P8 and P7, finds himself outside the top 10 and not scoring any points at the moment. Dixon on a charge there in 3rd position. Magnussen's definitely found or kept up his pace at the moment because the gap has gone out to 2 seconds. Whether or not Van Doorn's going to have to try and find a little bit extra with the pace that Dixon is currently delivering in that car. As we come down the start-finish straight once again, Chaz Mostert ducks out of the toe, but he's not going to find a way through. He's going to have to try and go down the inside this time, and does go through. He wasn't able to duck back in that time as he found the Team Switzerland car well and truly in the way, and Kevin Estre retires. Engine failure for the Frenchman. And Dixon's gearbox is gone, so a shame for Dixon. He was going so well there in 3rd position, catching Van Doorn. But once again, the gearbox fails on him. So that essentially puts Mostert into P3. Kobayashi there with a loss of the front wing, and for some reason there a graphic saying Delatraz with a 2 points on his license, so I'm not quite sure about that. Whether or not that was a typo or not, we'll later find out. And Dennis with an engine failure. They're really starting to drop like flies in this second part of this race. Magnussen in the lead, 3 seconds he has now over Van Dorn. And Mostert has a fast moving chicane to try and get round in the form of Yuki Tsunoda. Well, Power at some point has managed to get through on Buemi for P6. As we look back now, this is Tsunoda's rear camera. Looking back at Mostert, you can see Van Gisbergen just behind him as well. Buemi's gone back in front of Power. You see struggling there from Verline. Verline trying to find a way through on De Vries, but you could just see he was following so closely through that turn 4. The front end just wasn't quite as compliant as he wanted it to be. Now, Power under a lot of pressure now. He's been dispatched by Buemi, who's managed to take a few car lengths out of him. But now he's got a very hungry bunch of drivers behind him in the form of De Vries, Verline and Freins. To come down to the start-finish straight once again. De Vries looking to pick him off in the background. Freins is making a move on Verline. And through goes De Vries on Power. Freins also gets through on Verline. Meanwhile, Mostert's gone through on Tsunoda, and Magnussen's dropped behind Van Dorn. What's going on to Magnussen? And it's potentially a loose wheel for your race leader. There he is, going slow on the outside of turn 5, and what was turning out to be a very dominant performance from the Dane. It's all come to nothing. So that gives the lead there to Van Dorn. Mostert's been released by Tsunoda, so whether or not he's going to have some pace to try and catch Van Dorn. He's got 7 laps to do so. And Van Gisbergen trying to find a way through on Tsunoda. Trying everything he can, and he's going to try down the inside into turn 1. He pulls out the slipstream, goes down the inside. He's got the move done even before he gets to turn 1. So Van Gisbergen up into 3rd. And he's now released to try and chase after Mostert and Van Dorn. Here is your new race leader, Stoffel Van Dorn. 3.3 seconds he has to Mostert. Back in 3rd, Van Gisbergen hasn't shaken Tsunoda at the moment, so Tsunoda could come back at Van Gisbergen here, which Van Gisbergen definitely won't be happy about. Meanwhile, Buemi trying to find a way through on Tsunoda, and that's kind of scuppered any chances of him going through into turn 1. So Tsunoda having a look, trying to find a way through on Van Gisbergen and goes back through on him. It is only a 10-second penalty at the moment, so he's not completely written off. But as it stands at the moment, with the penalty applied, he will go outside the top 10. Van Dorn, who's lost a bit of time here to Mostert, it's down to 3 seconds. But the laps are ticking away at the moment. Here's Philip Hansen in the final points paying position. He's ahead of Pagano at the moment. Wehrlein up into 9th. And in the background there's some smoke, so I think that might be Alex Palou I can see smoking in the background. René Rast running in 12th at the moment. But here's Chaz Mostert, and indeed he is starting to close on Van Dorn for the lead. Further on back, Van Gisbergen, who's lost out here to Sonoda. He's under pressure here from Buemi. Buemi's going to try and have a look into turn 1, dives down the inside. Meanwhile, the two Dutch cars almost having to come in together into turn 1. So, only a few laps remain. And it's Juncker who's actually had the retirement. I knew it was one of the Spanish cars. So, the car being craned away. Another retirement already here in just the sprint race. Here's Sonoda. Third on the road at the moment. So Van Gisbergen under pressure now. He's fallen off the back of Sonoda and Buemi. He now finds himself with two Dutch cars swarming over the back of him. Down the inside it goes to Vries. Freins tries to follow through, but the door was closed too soon for Freins to find a way through. Here's Sonoda. So come around this fast swooping turn 4, which has been altered coming into this race. So we haven't seen any of the violent crashes that we saw earlier on. The gap at the front still slowly coming down, but whether or not we're going to have enough laps. Buemi trying to go down the inside of Sonoda, and that's not going to work for him. But he still looks as though he's going to have a good drive coming out the final corner. Obviously, as the team have been saying to him, this battle doesn't really matter, but at the rate that De Vries is moving, it could be crucial. So through goes Buemi into P3. Further back, can Van Gisbergen do anything about these two orange cars? He wasn't able to hang on in front of De Vries, but he seems to be doing better here, as that looks to be Pagano with an engine failure, and Enzo Tarn's just gone straight into the back of him. So that's both French cars out with some form of engine problem. Enzo Tarn's going to have to go back to pit lane after losing his front wing. But the leaders have crossed the line to start the final lap. And it's still Van Dorn who has just over 2 seconds over Chaz Mostert. Buemi there in third. But whilst all that's going on, Robin Frijns has managed to find a way through on Shane van Gisbergen, demoting him to 7th. And indeed, Enzo Tarn does manage to find a way back into pit lane. And Pagenaud comes to a halt. Meanwhile, coming around the second to last corner, Stoffel van Dorn, who's driven very well here this afternoon. Hopefully more to come with the feature race later, but around the corner, Van Dorn comes for one final time. He comes down the start-finish straight and takes the checkered flag. And it's another win on the books for Team Belgium. Mostert finishes second ahead of Buemi. Now, luckily enough for Van Gisbergen, the straight wasn't quite long enough for Vernline to find a way through. We wait for the rest of the field to come on through. Kobayashi comes across the line and we wait then for Enzo Tarn, who's not long come out of pit lane. He's probably wishing he'd have done that a lap sooner, as this could have been a possible fastest lap attempt for Tarn, but it's all going to amount to nothing. But he still crosses the line here. So on to the confirmation. Stoffel van Dorn, winner here, ahead of Chaz Mostert. Sebastian Buemi was third, with Nick de Vries fourth. Robin Frijns was fifth, ahead of Shane van Gisbergen. Pascal Wehrlein was seventh, ahead of Will Power and Philip Hansen. René Rast promoted into the points there, with Sandy Stuvik classified as 11th. Sonoda, with the time penalty, finds himself down in 12th, ahead of Alex Palou. And moving further on down the order, Ugo Ugochukwu was 14th, ahead of Charles Wirtz. Kamui Kobayashi was 16th, ahead of Enzo Tarn. And on to the retirements. Pagenaud was classified as being a lap down, but obviously we saw with that engine failure, Juncker also retired ahead of Magnussen, Dennis, Dixon, Estra, Kirkwood, Lundgaard and Delatraz going out on the first lap. And after all that, we go on to the feature races, which I'll hand you back over to Chris.
A much needed victory for Belgium there, sprint or feature, and much needed points for them and their campaign for the season. Well done, Stoffel van Dorn, and some fantastic drivers there here at La Plata. Some chaotic moments for sure, but we'll see how that all looks up for the feature races as well. But we can see now what the Division 2 feature grid looks like. And leading the way in P1 is Sheldon van der Linde. And it was a very close qualifying across the whole board. I mean, just the top five were separated by a 10th. Elvin Evans in second, with Antonio Fiat-Acosta in third, Pietro Fittipaldi in fourth, Jakobs Bukowski in fifth, Roman Danges sixth, Paddle Award seventh, Paul de Rester in eighth, Sandy Mitchell in ninth, then Jose Maria Lopez in 10th, Philippe Albuquerque in 11th, with Carl van der Linde in 12th, Robin Belinsky 13th, Raffaele Marcello 14th, Rafael Villagomez 15th, Max Hart 16th, Felipe Nasser 17th, Nico Verones 18th, Felix Rosquist 19th, Artur Decker 20th, Nicolas Latifi 21st, Ella Lloyd 22nd because of the penalty that she's had to serve, and then Antonio Giovinazzi in 23rd, Stefan Ricciardo 24th, Alex Dunn 25th, and Marcus Ericsson 26th. And then for the first feature race of the day, back again to you, Ryan.
It's Division 2 time feature race at La Plata, the first of the day, and it is Sheldon van der Linde on pole from Elvin Evans in second. And when the lights go out, we're racing here. Van der Linde gets a good getaway, poor getaway there from Evans, and he's plummeting back through the order. That's allowed Da Costa through into second, but here comes De Angelis sliding down the inside and taking second position away. There's already yellow flags out. There's a few cars involved there. Looks like Felipe Nasser being one of them. And there's contact there. And again, so Sheldon van der Linde, or was that no, Kelvin van der Linde, making contact with Alvin Evans. The pair of them haven't really... It's a bit of hip and shoulder, but they didn't seem to lose out at all, the pair of them. And there's Max Hart. So Max Hart being one of the people who I think lost a front wing in that turn 1 incident. And he's going to have to limp all the way back to pit lane. And this is going to be a long race for the Irishman, but back at the front, Sheldon van der Linde is leading ahead of De Angelis. The rest are under pressure now from Fittipaldi as they come down into turn 1. And Fittipaldi trying to have a few stabs at it, but unable to find a way through for the moment. So, penalty there for Alvin Evans. I think Team Wales might be a little bit hard done by there, but obviously they can put in a protest should they wish, and they've sort of had the wrath of the stewards so far this weekend, with Ella Lloyd having her 2 penalties in the sprint race, which does mean that she will be serving a race ban next time out, as she has accumulated more than 12 points. Back on board with Fittipaldi in the slipstream down the start-finish straight on Di Resta. Now, as you can see, not really making any inroads at all on the Scotsman. Either that Team Scotland car has got a bit more horsepower, or they're running a slightly lower downforce setup, which is allowing them to have a bit more top end on the straights. Further on back, this is Felipe Albuquerque in 12th position. He's just losing touch with O'Ward, but he's got Mitchell all over the back of him. Mitchell trying to go for a lunge. But by the looks of things, by the timing tower, didn't get through this time, but he's got a chance into turn 1. Further on back, this is Belinsky ahead of Lopez. Battle at the front, De Angelis still staying within touching distance of Sheldon van der Linde, not really letting him go anywhere. And across the line, what's the timing going to say? It's half a second or just over. As once again, Di Resta being hunted down by Fittipaldi, but that Team Scotland car with far more superior top speed, it seems, than the Team Brazil car, who even with a slipstream can't find a way through. Here is Jose Maria Lopez. It was a bit of a decent start to the sprint race, but didn't quite work out for him. On board now with Sheldon van der Linde, who has De Angelis all over the back of him now. He's going to be struggling for pace, I think, in comparison to the fast-charging Canadian behind him as they come onto the start-finish straight, and he's got the slipstream and the pace straight out of the bag now. Can van der Linde hold on? No, they're side by side. And through into the lead goes De Angelis. In doing so, has held van der Linde up a little bit, and now he's going to have to defend from Da Costa. Meanwhile, still struggling to find a way through on Di Resta is Fittipaldi, who's being closed in now by Smirkowski. Further on back is Felipe Albuquerque, still 12th position. Finds himself in no man's land, a bit between O'Ward and Villagomez. Now, back at the front, you can see Albuquerque. Sorry, no, Da Costa. We'd gone from Albuquerque. This is Da Costa. Lining up for a move as they come onto the start-finish straight. Sheldon van der Linde will have a little bit of a slipstream from the car in front, but it's not going to be enough, I don't think. And Da Costa goes down the inside into turn 1. Just about manages to get it stopped in time. And through into second now. What pace has he got compared to De Angelis? And Fittipaldi's finally got through on De Resta. Now, see if Jakob Smiakowski can make easier work of the Scottish driver compared to what Fittipaldi did. There's Felipe Nasr going a little bit wide. And almost finding himself being passed out by Latifi, and Stefan Rakelmi just losing out to Latifi there, it looked like. Monaco struggling this weekend. Both cars at the moment not even in the points. Now here's Ella Lloyd. After the brilliant result in Mexico, kind of tarnished it a bit this weekend. Obviously, as I said, we'll be receiving a race ban. Now, down the inside. Was O'Ward on Lopez, and that's allowed Albuquerque to also catch up onto the back of the Argentinian. Here is Sandy Mitchell, down into 15th now. After challenging Albuquerque at one point, I think, is lost out in the end and is only just hanging on to a singular point at the moment. Now, back towards the front, this is Sheldon van der Linde, who's trying to hold on to the back end of Da Costa. Da Costa trying to catch up to De Angelis. It's ebbing and flowing between a second and just under. Across the line they go to tick off yet another lap. Further on back, here's Jose Maria Lopez under pressure now from Felipe Albuquerque, and it looks as though this could be job done in turn 1, and indeed it is. And Argentina struggling for pace on home soil. And here's Rakelmi making a move there on Latifi for 21st. Ericsson, he's had a major failure there going into turn 1. And that is suspension well and truly gone for the Swedish driver. Although, probably glad that the day is coming to an end, as down the inside that looked like to be Latifi trying to find a way back through on Rakelmi, but unable to do so. Meanwhile, the Marshal's still pushing away at Ericsson's car. But De Angelis hasn't really gone away from Da Costa. Da Costa still hanging around that 1 second mark. This could come very interesting later on into the race, depending on what strategy both drivers are on. Further on back, this is Smiakowski, who's still struggling as the yellow flag's out into turn 1. I don't know if that's still as a result of trying to clear up Ericsson's car from last lap. But Smiakowski still struggling to find a way through on De Resta, very much like what Fittipaldi had. It took him multiple laps trying to find a way through. So it's the same scenario for the Polish driver. Further on back in 13th is last year's champion. Once again, the team definitely looks as though they've not gone in the right direction for setup, with Ericsson languishing outside of the points before his suspension failure. But here is Fittipaldi in 4th position. He's managed to pull away from Di Resta, but he's not really making any inroads to those ahead. Smirkowski looks as though he's had a good drive, but can he send it down the inside? He looks like no. That Team Scotland car definitely seems very good in a straight line as Giovinazzi retires. Oh, actually, he's managed to get it back to pit lane, so it must have been an electrical issue, possibly. And there must be an issue for Smirkowski. He's dropped behind Evans, and there you go. The car smoking away. So after what was looking very promising for the Polish driver, once again being let down by the machinery, that's been pretty much the story for him all season. So, back round there you can see the retiring Smirkowski, but at the same time, here comes Pato O'Ward, who's trying to find a way through on Calvin van der Linde. They're side by side down the straight, and down the inside he goes. So, up another position for the Mexican, P8. And the team finally recovering the smouldering Team Poland car. So another retirement. Back on board with Max Hart, who's having a bit of a recovery race now. He's well off of anyone else at the moment as a result of losing the front wing. And Sheldon van der Linde finding himself going backwards into no man's land, although he was hoping that potentially he was running a little heavier than those ahead, but I don't think that's the case. Meanwhile, at some point, Di Resta has gone back through on Fittipaldi. We haven't seen this, but Fittipaldi swarming all over the back end. Of Di Resta, who he thought he had that job done, so there must have been a mistake for Fittipaldi as Ricami goes down the inside of Nico Verone. But Fittipaldi must have made a mistake somewhere because he was pretty much off up the road compared to Di Resta, and now he finds himself behind back to Ella Lloyd, who currently sits in 14th position. Has managed to stay out of trouble so far. Has Marcello and Lopez battling away for 12th. So Lopez coming under pressure now from the Italian driver. Has got Lloyd just behind as well. There's going to be three of them slipstreaming off of each other. Lloyd's going to slot in to a point where Marcello's just going to have to go for it down the inside here potentially. And indeed he does. Oh, that gets very close there into turn one. Ella Lloyd's going to have to back out of that. Back on board with Antonio Felix da Costa. The gap at the moment is 1.1 seconds, so hasn't really changed massively over the course of this race so far. Here is Evans, who has got a bit of a penalty over his head, but sits in 6th at the moment and has a reasonable gap between himself, Fittipaldi and Bielinski behind. And it seems as though either De Angelis is up in the pace or Da Costa's tyres are starting to go a little bit after completing 13 laps of the 34. And we see our first pit stops from Albuquerque. See Rosenqvist, Lopez in there as well. Down the start-finish straight, Felipe Nasr trying to find a way through on Nico Varone. But unable to find a way through this time round. It just seems as though the Team Brazil car, very good around the corners, just hasn't got enough along the straights. On board with your race leader. And it seems as though, I think, De Angelis and Da Costa will be pitting at the same time. So along we go, and there you see both De Angelis and Da Costa go through. Sheldon van der Linde carries on. It looks as though there could be some traffic up ahead. So while the lead two pit, we'll wait to see whether or not they'll find themselves stuck in some sort of traffic, as Sandy Mitchell fights back and goes through on Villa Gomez for what at the moment is P8, but obviously both drivers yet to stop. Here's Pietro Fittipaldi carrying on, still behind the rest of them. There must be an issue somewhere for Fittipaldi. He's just completely gone off the pace. He's been dropped now by Di Resta. Here's Alex Dunn and De Angelis there coming out in P13, and Da Costa must have had a slow stop because the gap was about 1.2, 1.3 seconds as they came into the pit lane. It's now gone out to a little over 4 seconds, and van der Linde pits from the lead. That's promoted Fittipaldi. Di Resta has also pitted, and that's very close there. De Angelis will not be happy about his teammate getting in his way, but luckily he hasn't got to stay too much longer behind Latifi, as Latifi now pits. And you can see Sheldon van der Linde just exiting pit lane. He comes out just behind Da Costa on 1 lap fresher tyres. I don't think that's going to make too much of a difference in the strategy. Meanwhile, here's Roman Bielinski, 3rd at the moment, again yet to stop. He has Elvin Evans just up ahead, again also yet to stop. Our first of the drivers who have stopped is De Angelis down in 8th position. So around the final corner comes Fittipaldi, on board with Rosenqvist down in 15th at the moment. Bielinski, Fittipaldi, and who's that on fire? That looked like an Argentinian car going up in flames. Yet to see who that was. I think that might have been Nico Varone. No, it's Lopez. So started the day leading in the sprint, now ends it with the engine giving up on home soil. It's Not been the best of home weekends for Lopez. Varone just inside the points at the moment, but I think he hasn't stopped yet. Back at the front, and Elvin Evans continues on, but I think he's just pulling into pit lane. And indeed he does. So he's going to have slightly fresher tyres. Meanwhile, DeAngelis stuck behind Varone. Whilst all this has been going on, De Costa's not really made many inroads into the Canadian, who now retakes the lead. Evans still being serviced in pit lane at the moment, but he should come out just behind Fittipaldi. So Fittipaldi swoops on through into 4th position and has actually managed to undercut De Resta. So hopefully for Fittipaldi this might be another chance of him to get away. But Evans and Alex Dunn's had contact with someone. Can't quite make out who that is. It's one of the Team Italy cars, which I think is most likely going to be Giovinazzi, as Marcello finds himself in 12th at the moment. But quite clumsy stuff there into turn 1. DeAngelis leads by 2.2 seconds, so as a result of some of the back markers, De Costa's managed to close that 4-second gap to around 2 seconds. Meanwhile, Elvin Evans on the much fresher tyres finds himself still slipstreaming off the back end of De Resta. But as everyone's found so far, that Team Scotland car very hard to pass on the straight. Calvin van der Linde down in 10th. Things just haven't quite worked out for him in the second part of this race. Obviously, he had the collision with Evans on the first lap, although not much really happened as a result of that. And Lloyd trying to find a way through on Marcello. And she's going to want to try it and do it cleanly. So come through the swooping corners of 9, 8 and 10. Obviously not in that particular order. Evans still struggling to find a way through on De Resta. He's not going to try and send it down the inside. This is costing him. Back now with Paul De Resta still hanging in there for that 5th. Fittipaldi has managed to go a little bit up the road, but he's not getting away that quick from these two. De Resta feeling like he's been defending all race, but the nature of this circuit, other than into turn 1, not really seeing many other passing opportunities. And by having a car that's good in a straight line, that's pretty much allowing him to stay safe. Evans goes for another attempt, and again another lap stuck behind De Resta. He's going to have to require De Resta to make some sort of mistake if he wants any chance to go through. Meanwhile, back at the front, gap still pretty much staying the same. Still 2.2 between DeAngelis and De Costa. pretty much require a mistake at the moment from De Angelis for Da Costa to have any real chance of the win. There's Alpha Leclerc chasing down Villagomez for the final point. Villagomez struggling for grip there as they flick through 7, 8 and 9. You have the two, by the looks of things, I think it's the two Monegasque cars chasing down the Mexican. As they come through the final corner, he's got a good drive. But someone who's got an even better drive was Riquelme, and found himself pretty much stuck with nowhere to go at that point. But I think Riquelme would be very frustrated in that missed opportunity there. In the background, side-by-side action between Varone and Nasser. And I think that's possibly because Nasser's got a problem. He doesn't seem to be moving particularly quickly. Back on board with Da Costa, still matching each other for pace. It's still 2.2 seconds is the gap. It pretty much still is 2.2 seconds. De Resta still hanging on there in front of Evans, and it still looks as though Evans hasn't got anything to fight with at the moment, but he's going to send it down the inside this time, and he takes the position away. So good stuff there from Evans. I thought there was going to be another lap that will find himself stuck behind, as Felipe Albuquerque's had broken suspension, so he's our latest retirement. His name drops down the order. That then promotes Villagomez into the final championship point, but based on what we've seen, Riquelme definitely has some pace in this second part of the race. But back at the front, De Angelis still leads. Da Costa's managed to make some small marginal gains on the Canadian driver this lap, but nothing to feel frightened by. And by the looks of things, Felipe Nasr still circulating, so must have been a mistake from the Brazilian driver. But this is a very fast lap here, so De Angelis has got to hope that he doesn't find himself stuck behind back markers. As now it's Belinsky's turn to try and find a way through De Resta. And De Resta not happy about the fact that he's got to spend all race defending. He wants to be attacking at some point. But it looks as though it's not his day today to be doing that, but the job he is doing and trying to hold on to his position is a stellar job. Further on back, Calvin van der Linde trying to close on Pato Award for P8. Ella Lloyd currently sits in P10 ahead of Sandy Mitchell. And back on board now with De Resta, who still hangs on in front of Belinsky. Belinsky looks as though he's got a decent drive, but as soon as he pops out of the slipstream, I think he might have a go here. But no, once again, that car too quick for the moment for that Poland car. Further on back, here is Nicolas Latifi, who's trying to fend off Nico Varone, who sends it down the inside into turn 1. At least that gives something for the Argentine fans to cheer about, although not for the points at the moment. So here is Fittipaldi. Evans has pace behind, he's being told, and indeed he does. Now he's been released from Di Resta on the much fresher tyres. Now, Belinsky in the slipstream once again. He pulls out, but as soon as he pulls out of that slipstream, Di Resta starts pulling away. But this time, Belinsky has got the inside and he has got the position. More frustration from the Scotsman. Next defensive job will be against O'Ward. Meanwhile, back at the front, and De Angelis has been responding. He's managed to pull another tenth or so from Da Costa. Like I said, it's only really going to be a matter of a mistake or being held up by a back marker that's going to help Da Costa have any chance on winning this race. Although since the track officials have made changes to that turn 4, we haven't really seen many mistakes from drivers since then. Now Fittipaldi under threat from Evans, and it looks as though this is going to be easy taking for the Welshman. He's going to move his way up into P4 as he dives down the inside. He pretty much had the job done already. You just had to level him into turn 1, and that's P4 for Evans. But the problem he's got is he's sat so far behind the rest of the field. The chances of a podium are very slim at the moment. Sheldon van der Linde, you can just about see there, stuck behind what I think is Max Hart, who was had to come in for another pit stop, obviously having pitted at the end of lap 1 for that front wing. There was no way he was going to get a set tyres all the way to the end. And there's smoke in the background, it's Belinsky. So both Team Poland cars, their engines expiring, both on for very good results. And it's bitter disappointment on another weekend where they were both running so well. But meanwhile, whilst all this has been going on, O'Ward now fighting with Di Resta, and he pulls out to go down the inside. No, unable to get through whilst that's been going on. Ella Lloyd finds a way through on Calvin van der Linde. Felipe Nasr has also gone out, so he's had an engine failure, so 2 retirements on the same lap. So that has promoted Villagomez up into P15 and the final championship paying point. De Angelis has managed to open his gap out a little bit more now. But every time he does, Da Costa manages to respond, but it's only really a tenth here and there. Marcello trying to find a way through on Sandy Mitchell for 10th position. Behind him is Arthur Leclerc, and Rosenquist is battling with Riquelme over P13. So down the inside it goes Marcello. On Sandy Mitchell, takes away that P10. And Leclerc very quickly on the case. So Leclerc on to the back end of Mitchell. But Mitchell driving the same car as the Resta, so in theory it should be very strong in a straight line. So tucked up in the slipstream is Leclerc on Mitchell. You can see he's gaining. He thought about it into turn 1, but obviously felt he didn't have enough over him as Raquelme goes through on Rosenquist. So that's P13 for the Monegasque driver, 12th and 13th at the moment. It's better than it was earlier, where both cars weren't even in the points, but still not ideal for the Monegasque team, who on certain occasions have been running at the front this season. But still, as he crossed the line, 30 laps completed of the 34, and Max Hart's trying to find a way through on Da Costa. Now, I said about backmarkers potentially being an issue for De Angelis, but we didn't think it would be an issue for Da Costa, and that's not helped De Angelis at all. Da Costa at all. It has helped De Angelis. The only thing that Da Costa can hope for is that what Hart has done to Da Costa, he can do to De Angelis. But Hart, with obviously a lot more pace at the moment, can he help drag Da Costa to De Angelis? I mean, there's not many laps left for him to do it. Indeed, as a result, the gap has gone out to 3 seconds. As Latifi struggling for grip there on the flip-flop between 7 and 8 and 9. But across the line, 3 seconds was the gap, and still 3 seconds. Alvin Evans still not really made any inroads into Sheldon van der Linde in third, so barring any incidents, van der Linde fairly safe in that P3, which will be a good result for Team South Africa. And down the inside goes O'Ward on De Resta. Ella Lloyd thought she'd be able to follow through, but she might have to wait a couple more laps. But De Resta, who at one point thought he was fighting for the podium today, continues to drop down the order, but he'll still hopefully get a top 10. He could still get at P7 at the moment. But Lloyd, whose car definitely seems to be liking the corners a lot more than De Resta's. Still, De Resta, I think he can't wait for this race to be over. But it's not over yet. Still, a couple of laps remain, and Ella Lloyd already trying to find a way through on the Scotsman. Can she have another go into turn 1? No, so she's going to have one more attempt remaining, as Sandy Mitchell still continues to hold off Leclerc for that P11. Meanwhile, Roman De Angelis just having a bit of a cruise around, as still Max Hart hasn't allowed Da Costa through, and this is costing Da Costa quite a lot there, and he definitely will not be happy with the Irishman's antics there. It's well, I wouldn't say it's cost him the win, but he'll definitely feel it's made life a lot harder for him, as the gap has gone out once again, 3.5 seconds. On board with Sheldon van der Linde in that third position. We are on the last lap, and still Lloyd hasn't managed to get through on De Resta, as Max Hart's actually gone back through on Da Costa once again, and Da Costa goes back through on Hart. Luckily this is the last lap, because as you can see in the background, van der Linde has closed to within nearly a second to Da Costa as a result of these antics. But someone who's not particularly worried at all about what's going behind, as the gap is now up to 5.5 seconds, as Kelvin van der Linde has to retire the car on the last lap. But around the final corner comes De Angelis, and he's going to cross the line to win here at La Plata. A feature race victory once again for De Angelis. Da Costa manages to stay ahead of Sheldon van der Linde to take second, and van der Linde third. Evans across the line in fourth, and Fittipaldi fifth. And El Lloyd doesn't manage to get through on De Resta, and well, I think Mitchell managed to get back through on Leclerc and take P10 in the end, so I don't know what happened to Leclerc. We wait for the final cars to come across the line, Giovinazzi being that final car. So confirmation there of the race winner being Roman De Angelis ahead of Antonio Felix da Costa and Sheldon van der Linde. P4 went to Fittipaldi and Pato Award 5th, Paul Di Resta 6th, El Lloyd 7th, Raffaele Marcello was 8th, and Elvin Evans, after receiving that penalty from the lap 1 collision, finished 9th ahead of Sandy Mitchell in 10th. Arthur Leclerc was 11th ahead of Stefan Riquelme, and Felix Rosenqvist was 13th. Moving further on down the order, Rafael Villagomez finished 14th ahead of Nicholas Latifi, taking the final point there ahead of Nico Varone. Alex Dunn was 17th ahead of Antonio Giovinazzi. Calvin van der Linde and Max Hart was both classified a lap down, and onto the official retirements: Roman Belinsky, Felipe Nasr, Felipe Albuquerque, Jose Maria Lopez, Jakub Smirkowski and Marcus Ericsson. So after that race, we'll move back on to Division 1, where hopefully there will also be some more drama up ahead.
Well, that is the second feature race victory of the season for Roman De Angelis. What a fantastic drive by him. Very steady, very unchallenged, and, well, led the charge and did a very, very fantastic job. Well done to them. And very good performances for both Wells cars in the points, without penalty or not, regardless. And Scotland getting some points as well. Very, very well needed for their situation. And we can see now what the driver standings looks like after Division 2 feature race. Roman De Angelis now, in fact, takes the championship charge ahead of Maffei Marcello, only 6 back. With Pato Ward now in 3rd, 10 back, and Felix Rosenqvist now is in 4th. So the field has got very, very bunched up, and it's very close down the whole field. Jose Maria Lopez, after this round at home soil, is in P7, only 18 back. It is a very, very interesting indeed, and there are some drivers that really wish their campaign could get going more, and I feel a bit disappointed. Stefan Riquelme, for example, Giovinazzi with his retirement not out from P14. But yeah, and it's very, very interesting indeed for Division 2. And we can see that backed by the nation standings. Italy now still in front, but Portugal now in P2 with only 7 back from them. Canada is 17 points behind. Brazil now in P4 with Mexico P5. Argentina in P6, and Wales now crept up to 7th place in the standings. Sweden are now P8, but they're going to see if they can try and do something about that, because they missed out on promotion last season. They will need some form of efforts ahead. It seems like Marcus Ericsson isn't quite helping the situation, one could argue. But now for the last race of the day, Division 1 feature, and the Antipodean countries are covering the top 5. Will Power and Chaz Wilson, an Aussie 1-2 in qualifying, with Scott Dixon in third, Sebastian Buemi in the mix somehow amongst Aussie and New Zealand in P4, Shane van Gisbergen in P5 with Pascal Wehrlein 6th, Kevin Magnussen 7th, Louis Delatraz in 8th, Stoffel Bandor 9th, Kamui Kobayashi in 10th, with Nick De Vries in 11th, Alex Palou in 12th, with Yuki Tsunoda had to serve a 5-place grid penalty, now in 13th, Robin Franz in 14th, René Rast in 15th, Carl Cook was 16th, Philip Hansen 17th, Christian Lundgaard in 18th, Kevin Estre in 19th, Simon Pagenaud alongside him in 20th, and then we have Hugo Okochukwu in 21st, Jake Dennis 22nd, Charles Vince 23rd, Sandy Stuvik in 24th, with Daniel Godin in 25th, and Enzo Tarnavelichko in 26th. For the final feature race and final race of the day, back to Ryan Ferris.
It's time for the final race of this afternoon. It's the Division 1 feature race here at La Plata. It's Will Power on pole from teammate Chaz Mostert, and we'll be away racing. It's go, and it's a good getaway from the front row. Mostert getting a better getaway than Power, and Pascal Wehrlein with a blistering start there, up into the lead. Now he came from outside the top 5, so he must have had a brilliant getaway. So it is Wehrlein, Mostert and Power who come out of the first sector in the lead. Dixon there in 4th with Van Gisbergen in 5th. And Dixon already trying to scrap away with Power. And Buemi just outside in 6th. It seems as though Dixon struggling a little bit after that failed attempt at a move against Power. That's now put him under pressure from his teammate. And Hugo Okochukwu's already taken out his front wing, so he's going to be making a trundle back to pit lane. But at the front is Pascal Wehrlein from Chaz Mostert and Will Power there in 3rd. And they've had a bit of a breakaway now from Dixon there in 4th. Dixon already under pressure from Van Gisbergen. And down the inside comes Van Gisbergen. And Magnussen looking as though he was going to make a very opportunistic move. Apparently there was an incident, obviously off camera there, involving 3 or 4 cars, but that's going to have no further investigation. And after Magnussen trying the opportunistic move against Buemi and not getting it to stick, he has fallen back slightly, but Palou's gone through on Kobayashi for 8th. And still, it's the 2 Team New Zealand cars practically glued together, with Buemi hoping he can hang on and pick up the scraps if there are any. Wehrlein still ahead, but Power's going for a move on Mostert this time. So down the inside comes Power on Mostert after setting the fastest lap of the race. Dives down the inside. That's going to cost a pair of them a little bit of time against Wehrlein, but hopefully Power obviously showing he's got some sort of pace advantages. Whilst all that's been going on, Dixon's gone back through on Van Gisbergen. Kobayashi's also gone back through on Palou for 8th position. And it looks as though Palou struggling a little bit there on the exit of turn 4. And round the outside goes Delatraz. So opportunistic stuff by the Swiss driver. And Palou really out of rhythm there as a result of that mistake in turn 4. He's now got Tsunoda and De Vries all over the back of him. Tsunoda obviously out of position as a result of the grid penalty from race 1, as Mostert's trying to fight back at Power now. Team Australia don't want this. So he comes down at the start finish straight again, and I feel that these two are going to continue to trip each other up and allow Verline to get away, and indeed, as you can see, they go level into turn 1. And Mostert does the block pass on Power. I'm pretty sure we'll probably be seeing some angry team radio from the Australian at some point. And Verline being told the good news. Bohemi's managed to go through on Van Gisbergen, but Delatraz is slowing. So a puncture for Delatraz, and that's after a promising start to the race. It's all come to a bit of an early end for the Swiss driver. So first retirement of the race. That's promoted Robin Freins into the points. Still, the two Australian cars continue to scrap away. Mostert now under pressure from Power, and generally whatever you dish out against Power, he tends to dish back with interest. And Mostert claiming that this is all getting a bit silly, as Dixon in the background, who's managed to have a bit of a regroup now after he's had a few laps now not having to dice with his own teammate. He looks forward to try and find a way through on the two Australians in front. Meanwhile, Kamui Kobayashi there in 8th. Now what's happened to Palou? So Palou's, after scrapping with Kobayashi for 8th, has now found himself down in 11th. So obviously after making that mistake, even though he would have gained a position back from the retiring Delatraz, he still finds himself down in 11th, and it looks as though he's going to be in a world of pain. As you can see, it's pretty much becoming the Palou train, with all these cars behind lining up to go through. First car to try and find a way through is Philip Hansen, but you can't get the job done there into the final corner, but he still looks as though he's got a decent run out of the final corner. Side by side here are the two drivers, although I think he's is he going to be close enough for the move? It looks as though he is. Also in the background there is René Rast going down the inside of Stoffel van Dorn to 13th. Back on board with Will Power, who this lap manages to build enough of an advantage to Mostert that he's not under pressure, or as much pressure anymore from his teammate, but all this has pretty much allowed Verline to build a 2-second advantage. Further on back, this is Lundgaard fending off Sandy Stuvik. René Rast trying to find a way through on Palou. Definitely Palou struggling here in the early parts, whether or not he's running a heavier fuel load than those around him. As Rast goes down the inside, and they're all chopping and changing, and down the inside goes Van Dorn, nearly collects Rast into turn 1 there, but they all just somehow manage to sort each other out without colliding with each other. Whilst all that's been going on, Bohemi's also managed to go through on Dixon. Further on back, another move being created there, and that's Lundgaard trying to find a way through on Freins. It looked as though he almost had the job done there. So Verline running a heavier fuel, a lighter fuel load, so he'll have to put a little bit earlier. Jake Dennis still trying to find a way through on the struggling Palou, who's almost dropped outside of the points the way things are going at the moment. So the start of this race has been less than ideal for Team Spain. As you can see, the other car of Daniel Uncadea is down in 24th position, which is very much unlike the Spaniard. Kirkwood also struggling there in 20th. This is all fairly big, important stuff for the championship. The gap between Wehrlein and Power is starting to come down gradually. It was 2 seconds. It's now down to 1.8, so not a massive difference there. What will matter the most is whether or not Wehrlein comes out in traffic when he has his early pit stop. Which could help Power, who will be on slightly fresher tyres, but obviously pitting later as Lundgaard goes for a lunge. But unable to find a way through this time around. But this is going to be on Palou, as you can see down the start-finish straight, side by side, and Palou relegated outside the points. Kirkwood pulling a move there on Kevin Estre, and again, like Team France struggling. And very much as I suspected, I think Palou is hoping the same thing, that that car is heavy on fuel. If that is the case, if he's running that heavily, the pace difference between the cars come next time round as Charles Vitt's struggling there, as I think he was just passed for position by Pagenaud, maybe. Or it might have been Estre. Frines, who was actually in the points at one point, is outside the points down in 17th, but one of the easier cars it seems to pass at the moment is just in front of him in the form of Alex Palou. Palou, who's still staying within the slipstream of Lundgaard, so opportunity there maybe for a point. Frines dips in and out of the slipstream, so does Palou, but not close enough for a move this time around. Back at the front with Pascal Wehrlein. The gap is now extended to 2 seconds once again. Dixon running heavy, so 5 or nearly 6 seconds off the lead for the New Zealand driver. But it could potentially prove helpful to him in the latter stages. Whether or not the tyre advantage is going to play a big part. He's also going to have to overtake 3 or 4 more drivers. Here's Yuki Tsunoda fighting with De Vries for P9, and joining on the back is Hansen in 11th. But down the inside comes De Vries and takes P9 away from Tsunoda. Tsunoda's going to try and fight for it, but he has to relinquish the position there. Kobayashi just a little bit further up in the distance in P8, but well, for a moment then I thought Hansen was going to try it round the outside, but just not the grip he was hoping for there. And for a moment then I think Rast was almost going to try and do the same thing. Still, towards the front end of the field here is Mostert in that P3's. Losing sight, or not necessarily sight, but he's losing ground to his teammate Power, and Buemi's not too far behind. Here is Robin Frines, who's just behind Lundgaard, so he's found a way through on Palou. And it looks as though Kirkwood is about to do the same thing. thought he was going to do the same thing, but not this time. But this is turning out to be a tough day at the office for the Spaniard. Here is Power, who's still somewhat keeping Wehrlein honest, toing and froing on the lap times, and as we know, Wehrlein's going to be pitting earlier than Power, but we're not quite sure by what sort of margin. So Power will be pitting before Mostert, so Mostert's going to be going longer than Power and longer than Wehrlein. And once again, Kirkwood trying to find a way through on Palou for 17th position, and whilst that's going on, Charles Weerts goes through on Stuvik, and indeed Kirkwood does go through on Palou this time round. Further on up the field is Robin Freins, who's still trying to find a way into the points. Will Power is taking a little bit of time. Out of Wehrlein. Debate's going on whether or not he'll be pitting this lap or next. Boemi trying to find a way of catching Mostert. He's just about dipped inside the crucial 1 second. As further on back here is Hansen going through into P10 on Sonoda, but at the same time Rast all over the back of the pair of them, so it looks as though out of those three, Rast might be the quicker. As Weerts, Charles Weerts and Danny Juncker become amongst the first drivers to pit, as Kirkwood, after doing some hard work trying to pass below, it looks as though potentially a gearbox failure, indeed no gears for Kirkwood, so Team America not having the best of weekends, struggling outside the points, and a driver who's been so used to running at the front so far this season will be probably happy to go for an early bath today. Meanwhile, down the start-finish straight once again, Power has cleared off from Mostert, and Mostert coming under increasing pressure from Boemi behind, and it looks as though Team England and indeed Hansen ducks for pit lane. Here's Will Power, who looks as though he's gone a little bit wide there on the exit of turn 4, but he's still chasing after Wehrlein, and obviously he came through this lap, so I think he'll be pitting at the end of this one, I'm guessing. De Vries still fighting away there with Kobayashi now. We'll look to the front around turn 10 and up to the final corner. Will we be seeing Wehrlein pitting? And indeed we will. The team have called into the box as Charles Weerts tries to find a way through on Ugochukwu. And through we go. So Power is also pitted. That's allowed Mostert and Boemi to continue on into first and second. Dixon there in third, who we know is running somewhat heavier on fuel. And it all comes down to where Power and Wehrlein filter out. So Wehrlein's come out behind Estra, and Power has come out just behind Verline, so this is going to be very interesting stuff, as Charlevier's still unable to find a way through on the American. More teams out in pit lane. I think that's going to be Team England. I think they've just done a pit stop. So after all that, just waiting for the timing tower to change, as there's Dixon there in third with Van Gisbergen about a second behind. So Mostert comes to pit lane, Buemi carries on. And Dixon's retiring, so Dixon, who was showing a lot of promise here with the longer strategy, once again the car fails on him. That sounds as though, whether or not that was a transmission or a suspension failure of some sort, it was indeed a suspension failure. So another car out. So fourth position at the moment is Verline, with Mostert in fifth. Luckily for them, a lot of the drivers who they were stuck behind pitted shortly after, so they only really had a lap of pain. They still have Stuvik just in front, and it seems as though Team Switzerland not entirely sure on their strategy at the moment. They didn't seem to tell Buemi with much confidence on what their plan was. As there is Stoffel van Dorn in second, as Enzo Tarn under pressure from Daniel Juncadea, and that's for 22nd position. Talk amongst the paddock that there's a potential that Team Thailand may not be around come next season, and possibility of a new nation taking part. Van Dorn still there in second position, although he is quite a bit out of the picture at the moment. Obviously sat 11 seconds, nearly 12 seconds off of Buemi. So even if he does go longer, he will have a massive tyre advantage, but he'll have a lot of work to do as Buemi continues on. And there's De Vries trying to find a way through on Sonoda, but still not able to pry a way through on the Japanese driver, who's continued on at the moment. So Buemi pits from the lead. Van Dorn also in second position. Here is your leaders going across the line. You can see Buemi leaving his pit box, but Verline's going to be well in the lead. Now, it's whether or not Buemi's tyre advantage is going to serve as much of an advantage as the two Australian cars are back together again. So Power and Mostert potentially be tripping over each other once again. And the team telling Power that Mostert is faster and not to hold him up, but Power will be saying, well, I've been in first place most of this race so far in terms of this pair. But Team Australia do not want these two to hold each other up, as Buemi continues to close on the fresher tyres as he's just fresh out of pit lane. Mostert has a look into turn into the final corner. That's going to upset his chances of making a move on Power into the first corner. He's still had a decent exit out of the final corner, but I don't think he's going to be close enough for a move. Although saying that, down the inside he comes, so doesn't even matter if he's a couple of car lengths off of the car in front. He still has managed to go through. Here's Sebastian Buemi now all over the back end of Power as a result of the pair exchanging positions. Further back there's René Rast, who's been showing some good pace. Robin Frijns is pitted. So what can Mostert do? Can he get away from Power? The gap is already over a second now between Mostert and Power, which is not going to help Power's chances against Buemi. Now here's Buemi, pops out and has a go at passing Power down the start-finish straight, and Kevin Magnussen's got an issue. So Magnussen with a suspension failure, another car retiring, and indeed Buemi has gone through into P3. Whilst all this has been going on, the gap has closed by a couple attempts to Wehrlein. Confirmation there of a suspension failure for Magnussen. So here's Wehrlein, he exits turns 9, goes into turn 10, and that gap at the front is gradually coming down. And I think, was that... no, my eyes were deceiving me. I thought there was smoke coming out the back end of Power's car. And Buemi being told, with those fresher tyres on board, he has got the pace as Frijns goes through. I think Frijns must have had an issue somewhere, because I think he may have had to pit a second time. That's why he's behind Ugochukwu for 21st position, and quite some considerable margin off the rest of the field. But that has put Charles Weerts and Palou. Well, I said Palou, but Estra's now gone through and demoted him outside the points. And Frijns is still unable to find a way through on the American driver. And as they pull side by side, this is going to be fairly easy taking. Now, Mostert, who has been gradually closing on Wehrlein for the lead, now finds himself under pressure from Buemi, and provided Buemi gets a decent enough slipstream, he might find a way through. He pulls out, down the inside he goes. Can he get the job done? Yes, he can. So Buemi up into second, and as the team already reckoned, with a few laps fresher tyres than Wehrlein ahead, the gap is 3.6 seconds. And with 12 laps remaining, he has got time to do it. As we ride on board with Chaz Mostert, you can see Sebastian Buemi pulling away up ahead, but after that early turn of pace, is he going to find himself back under pressure now from Will Power, as Yuki Tsunoda looks to be having an issue here? And I think is going to be retiring as Jake Dennis trips over the back end of Tsunoda and goes spinning off, loses the front wing. So you can see there's the slow Yuki Tsunoda, who's trying to stay out of the way, but obviously at some point he wrong foots Dennis, and Dennis just goes out onto the dirty side of the track whilst he tries to pass the retiring Tsunoda. And that's pretty much, I think, any chances of him scoring points out the window, as he's going to have to try and get the car back onto the track, spin turn it, and get a new front wing fitted. But he's still struggling to get out of the dirt, but he has now. Sonoda there, confirmation of his retirement. That was a suspension failure, and well, suspension that seems to be one of the main issues here. Buemi continuing to close the gap down. It's 2.9 seconds. That's potentially going to be even less when they cross the line. So Dennis has made it back pit lane now. As a result of this pit stop, given where the leaders are, will he be filtering out just in front of them? You can see him just coming down out of pit lane, but I think the leaders are going to be just about clear of him. There's Kobayashi there, struggling through the final corner. Now he's coming under pressure now from Nick de Vries, who's gradually closing, but he's not going to be close enough this time for a move. Here's Mostert, who you can see Jake Dennis has slotted in between the two Australian cars, so Mostert's going to be fairly happy about that, although the one problem they're going to have is that Dennis is going to be on much fresher tyres, and he could start to upset those in front of him. Still on board now, and looking back to Nick de Vries, who's trying to find a way through on Kumi Kobayashi for that P9. Still at the front, here is Pascal Wehrlein, who's continuing to lose time to Sebastian Buemi. So they cross the line, as I said, Dennis, on those fresher tyres, looks as though he's going to unlap himself against Mostert, and indeed he does. And Mostert not happy at all by that, and that's helped Power in his attempts to try and catch up onto the back of Mostert and take that podium position away from him. Meanwhile, back at the front, the gap, so I think we'll go through this timing sector, will be below a second, and indeed it is, between Wehrlein and Buemi. So Wehrlein trying to do everything he can to hold off Buemi, but obviously Buemi with the tyre advantage, but he is running out of laps at the moment. And you can just about make out he's making time up through those corners, down the straight in the slipstream. Whether or not he makes up any more time, Wehrlein already looking as though he's taking some more defensive lines, although at the moment defending fresh air as Buemi's not close enough. But the laps continue to tick down. 26 laps of the 34 completed. Buemi has continued to close. It's down to almost half a second. Wehrlein coming into the danger zone now, but as you can see a third car there, and that's Jake Dennis on those fresh tyres, and they're going to be hoping that he doesn't play a part in this battle for the lead. Gap just dipping under half a second now as they cross the line. Buemi making up a lot of ground there into turn 1 under the brakes. The team telling Buemi to get the job done as soon as possible so that they don't come under any threat from the fast charging and approaching Dennis, who is a lap down. And it looks as though Buemi's got the message. He is all over the back of Wehrlein for this first position. It looks as though he's close enough that he's going to try and make the move. He may have a look here, and indeed he does have a look here. Is this going to affect his drive out the corner? I don't think it is. That's given Wehrlein a little bit of breathing space, but I don't think it's going to be quite enough. And indeed he does pull out to make the move. They're side by side down the start-finish straight. And down the inside goes Buemi. He chops in front of the nose of Wehrlein and had that move done before turn 1, so that's not really affected Wehrlein too much. He can try and stay within the toe, but the next issue he's going to have is Dennis just behind. Here's Chas Mostert, who's had some very good pace. So too did Power at the start of this race, but it's not quite converted into the second part of this race. He sits around about half a second off the lead at the moment. Wehrlein still fighting away. He's only half a second off of Buemi, but the issue, as I said, Dennis is going to try and find a way through. Wehrlein is close enough though. He's closed the gap down to 3/10 as they're going to come across the line. He's going to have a slipstream, but I think Dennis is going to find a way through here. And indeed he does. He pops out of the slipstream. Wehrlein still with a slipstream off of Buemi in front, but still down the inside goes Dennis. And I think if he can do that to Wehrlein, I think he can do that to Buemi just up ahead. So Wehrlein's going to hope that Dennis can somehow trip up Buemi in front, and the battle will probably still resume. Here's Alex Palou, who has been having not the best of races, but he's snuck into the points. And pretty much echoing what I've somewhat said so far this weekend. With Palou only just hanging on there with 15th as a result of retirements, and teammate Junkadea struggling to even get inside the top 20. So across the line, and smoke in the background, and it's Hansen. So Hansen's car has gone up in smoke in P7. He's not going to make it to the end. 30 laps completed, there's 4 remaining. And he's holding up Van Dorn here, although Van Dorn is going to get another position. Around the outside he goes. So Van Dorn released. Here is Pascal Wehrlein, who's being run-footed at the moment, I think, as once again De Vries tries to find a way around the outside of Hansen, and in doing so has gone out wide and lost his front wing. So he's going to have to make a quick pit stop there. But a water leak has prevented Hansen from finishing this race. and Team England, who were on course for double points, both having their own issues. So De Vries now pits. That's promoted Van Dorn up into 7th. And actually, no, that's Charles Wirtz we're looking at there, who's gone up into 9th. And really, what we thought was going to happen hasn't happened, and Wehrlein's scrapping away with Dennis, which Wehrlein would definitely not be happy with. And as you can see the pair of them just about battling away up ahead. And this is allowing Mostert to catch, although there's not too many laps left as Jake Dennis once again goes to unlap himself. And sends it down the inside of Wehrlein. Wehrlein will not be happy about this. And he would potentially argue, considering they were still fairly close across the line before Dennis unlapped himself, that this has prevented any chance of Wehrlein trying to fight back for the lead. But Mostert can see an opening. 2 laps remain at the moment. Here is Pascal Wehrlein, who's still stuck behind Jake Dennis. And you can see they're not happy with the Englishman's driving. He's going this way and that way, sends it down the inside of the Englishman. Tries to hold him up, and as you can see, Mostert slowly catching in the background. Dennis trying to find another way through. Will be coming across the line to start the final lap. And Dennis comes back at Wehrlein. So Dennis going to send it back down the inside of Wehrlein, and Wehrlein's going to be absolutely fuming at this point. There's Wehrlein, and there's the 2 Australian cars in the background. I think, luckily for Wehrlein, this is the last lap of the race. There is your race leader, Sebastian Buemi, who went for the different strategy, went long into the first stint, and has taken advantage of the tyre offset, and has moved his way through the field into the lead. And he rounds the final corners. Nick de Vries just taking the fastest lap of the race on those fresh new tyres with a new front wing. But around the final corner comes Pascal Wehrlein. Sorry, Sebastian Buemi. And the checkered black flag is definitely being made ready. And he crosses the line to win here at La Plata. A crucial victory there as Wehrlein gets back in front and will not be happy with Jake Dennis only just finishing ahead of Mostert, really. And what was a between 5 to 6 second advantage he had over Mostert comes across the line to be less than 2 seconds. But we wait for the rest of the field to come through. Enzo Tarn actually scoring a point in the end. Although we still wait for him to cross the line. Alex Palou, after what has been a dreadful weekend, still manages to scrape in 13th. And Danny Younger missing out there on points. But the rest of the field, I believe, are all filtered through. Note here is Ugo Chugwu, who crosses the line and is the last finisher. So we wait for confirmation, and there it is, Sebastian Buemi, your race winner today, ahead of Pascal Wehrlein, and Chaz Mostert was 3rd. Will Power was 4th, ahead of Rene Rast, Shane van Gisbergen 6th, Stoffel van Dorn 7th, and Kamui Kobayashi 8th. Charles Weerts came home in 9th ahead of Christian Lundegaard in 10th. Sandy Stuvik was 11th ahead of Kevin Estre and Alex Palou 13th. Moving on to the rest of the field, Simon Pagenaud was 14th ahead of Enzo Tarn, taking the final points playing place in 15th. Daniel Cadere 16th, Nick De Vries 17th, Robin Frans 18th, and Hugo Ugochukwu, the last finisher, in 19th. Jake Dennis was 20th, a lap down, and Philip Hansen was classified in 21st, having retired with the engine failure. Yuki Tsunoda was the first main retirement ahead of Kevin Magnussen, Scott Dixon, Carl Kirkwood and Louis Delatraz. And big implications there in the championship with certain teams not having the best of weekend. I'll hand you back over to Chris, who will guide you through those championship implications.
Well, that's a race win for Sebastian Buemi. He's been knocking on the door for a long time, and it's finally here. Well done to him, and the team manager will be very, very pleased with that. And Germany getting 2 cars in the top 5, considering where they were early in the season, that is an unbelievably good turnaround. And it's a commiseration to Australia for not winning the race, but they got 2 cars in the top 4, so well done to them as well. Disappointed there from Alex Palou, but like he said, he'll be able to fight back. I'm sure we all think he will. So we can see what the standings looks like now for Division 1. Sebastian Buemi is now your championship leader. Pascal Wehrlein in 2nd, Nick De Vries in 3rd, but Kevin Estre now down in 4th. The Shane van Gisbergen is in the wings there in P5, 15 back. Anything can happen still in this championship. And Alex Palou is now down in 10th, 27 back from the lead. Reddy Rast, though, with his efforts, are now in P15, 49 back, but he still want to try and make some charge. And Simon Pagenaud, the defending champion in 22nd, really is not living up to the title victory last season. But now we can see the nation standings. Australia are now in front, 12 ahead of Germany, who were, I think, P8 or P9 before this round even started. Switzerland now in 3rd, New Zealand in 4th, Netherlands now at P5, Denmark 5th, and Spain has slipped down to 7th place. Out of the BOP range though, so that's one thing they could take it into the next round. France now in 8th, England after this now in 9th, and Thailand is still sort of struggling, even despite getting in the points in the feature race. But they are well and truly in the drop zone. And that is round 8 done, and it'll be round 9, which is going to be heading across to Africa, to the Kyalami circuit, and that's going to be an interesting race in itself, very technical circuit, and we'll see what the cars look like there and see how they fare, same day, same time in a fortnight's time. I'm Chris Kavanagh, your host for the series. Thank you so much for watching. Ryan Ferris has been your commentator, and this is the Nations Cup, signing off.